last week we were in Macy, Nebraska, at the tribal reservation for the Omaha Nation, and we are very pleased today to be coming to you from Yankton, up above Sioux City, and we're going to talk a little bit about those areas that we've passed through since the last time we saw you, and just happy to have you again with us. And we're getting to a very, very exciting part of the story as we get ready to move boats above the first dam on the Missouri River here at Gavin's Point, and we'll be moving above the river into what is known as Lewis and Clark Lake, and then on up the river, and we'll encounter the next series of dams as we move on up the river. But again, welcome to Lewis and Clark Live with Lewis and the Lewis and Clark reenactment as we make our way up the river. I want to get rid of a few things right away, take care of a little bit of business. We look forward to emails throughout today's broadcast at lewisandclark@clayton.k12.mo.us. That's LEWISANDCLARK, Lewis and Clark, at Clayton, CLAYTON.K12.mo.us, and we look forward to getting those emails from you throughout the course of today's broadcast, as well as at any time. You can always send us an email at that address there, and we'll be happy to answer your questions as quickly as we can if we don't get them to them during the broadcast. So I want to start, as we always do, talking about what happened to the original expedition 200 years ago in the course of this last week. As you may remember, on the 19th of August, when we saw you last, we were talking about the fact that probably the most important thing that was happening from the journals of 200 years ago on that day was the fact that Sergeant Floyd had become violently ill on the evening of the 19th, and ultimately he did die on the 20th. And we're going to talk about the reenactment aspect of that as well, but this last week has been a particularly eventful one for the Corps. On the 19th of August, Floyd becomes ill with a stomach ailment, and they talk about a violent colic in the journals that he was suffering from. We believe, based upon our understanding of the medicine at the time and what's described as to have happened to him, that it's probably, or at least speculated to most likely have been an attack of appendicitis, which curiously enough was not even really understood until many years later, and I believe the first appendix operation wasn't successfully completed until the 1880s. So it's important to understand that even though this seemingly is a rather benign situation today, an appendix attack, although serious, but our medical knowledge today allows us to deal with that very easily. 200 years ago, it wouldn't have mattered where Sergeant Floyd was. He could have been in Philadelphia with Dr. Rush himself, with the best medical professionals in the field at that time, and he still would have probably died if indeed it was appendicitis. So that's kind of an important part of the story. In addition to that, shortly after Floyd's death, the Corps moves up to what is now Elk Point, South Dakota, and we're going to talk a little bit about our visit there as well. And at Elk Point, South Dakota, the Corps stopped, and they held an election there. And the men of the Corps voted and recorded their vote there, and Sergeant Gass, who was promoted. Now, Gass had been a sergeant prior and had taken a demotion in order to be on the expedition. In fact, Patrick Gass almost didn't go on this expedition originally, and there were some, he had to sort of convince Lewis that it was a good idea for him to go along. And ultimately, in the course of this election that took place at what is now Elk Point, Gass was elected by that squad to take over Floyd's position as the squad leader. So it's again a very full military sequence of events that's happening. You may remember from the week before we talked about Moses Reed. Now Floyd, and they sent out a group of men to bring Reed back in that last week, and undoubtedly he was court-martialed. There was a lot of military aspects to what was going on, and then of course the death of Floyd, which was undoubtedly had a tremendous impact on the welfare of the Corps emotionally and psychologically. This was a man who, by all accounts, was a strapping, healthy man, beloved by the rest of the members of the Corps, and his death unquestionably was a cause for concern for the rest of the Corps. If Floyd they were all potentially in peril, and again, this was an unexplained death, which was even more complicating for matters at the time, because if he had fallen or he had drowned or something that they could explain away, but they didn't know why he died, so it must have been very difficult for them to process his passing. Then the election of Sergeant Gass, and this is a particularly important moment as well. It really was outside the normal protocol for how an NCO would be elected or a sergeant would be appointed in a military unit. But again, we see Lewis and Clark time and time again sort of modifying the rules, as it were, or making the men of the expedition more involved in the decision process, and that's a good lesson for us today. We look at the success of this operation, and time again, Lewis or Clark sort of turn to the men and the guidance of the men, and at least accept their input, even if at places like the decision point, if they end up making a different decision than the men, but they at least draw on the men for their input, and certainly that is what happened with Gass's election. Gass becomes the new sergeant, and they move forward at that point. A lot of new things are happening. Flora and fauna, they shoot their first bison this week. So they've had their first taste of fresh killed buffalo this week. And indeed, Dave Hansen, some of you may remember from our journals from our 2001 trip. Dave Hansen was the gentleman who operates the Triple U Buffalo Ranch up by Pier, where we're headed. On just the other day when we were down at Elk Point, on the night before the day that they shot the first bison there on the 23rd, Dave Hansen actually flew his Super Cub, Piper Super Cub, down and brought some buffalo from his ranch down to us. So that was a great thing. We want to thank David for that. So they've shot buffalo. They've made their way up to an area now that's very different. They've come now to the area that 200 years ago was inhabited by the Ponca and by the Yankton Sioux. And so there's a whole new dynamic happening. The encounters with Native Americans now are not so anomalous. They're not so unusual. They know now that they are truly in Indian country, and that the diplomatic aspect of the mission is in full swing as they start to meet with Native Americans on a regular basis. And certainly they're aware of the fact that the word is spreading among Native American tribes that they're coming. So that's sort of a little bit about what's going on in the course of this past week. One of the most exciting things happened on the 25th of August, just yesterday, and we reenacted that. We're going to show you some footage from that. But on the 25th of August, one of the highlights of the original expedition was the walk to Spirit Mound. And you may remember that Lewis and Clark and a number of other men, almost a dozen, including the dog, left the boats and started walking to this place that they had heard about, this place that, according to the Native American lore, was inhabited by little people, little devils, a very spiritual place. And they thought that this place was a place that had a lot of evil energy, and it was a place that was sort of feared by Native Americans, although there were pilgrimages to it by Native Americans, and certainly Lewis and Clark made their pilgrimage to this hill to sort of see what it was all about. And we talk a lot about the understanding of the original Corps about this world they were going into. One of the interesting things about Spirit Mound and this inhabitation by these little people, and the fact that the birds seem to congregate around this place, of course, in the Native American mind, was oftentimes explained away in a very naturalistic way, a spiritual way. Lewis and Clark made this pilgrimage to the hill, and they found when they got there that this piece of land that had been formed by glacial flow, it was a natural formation, quite large. It appears almost to have had to be handmade, much as some of the mounds we know of back in the Mississippian culture and that sort of thing. But this mound, in fact, was built by nature's hand. And when they did get there, they understood why the birds were there. There was an updraft caused there, which forced the insects to congregate around that area and forced the insects up out of the field and the meadows and prairies there. And the birds then would swarm around it there, collecting the insects, feeding on the insects. So we made our trek out there as well, and we're going to take a look at that. But that was a very spiritual time for the Corps, something the Corps spent a lot of time talking about. Clark describes the hill in detail. They talk in great detail about the walk itself out there. So, and then that brings them here to where we are today geographically, and that's at what is now Yankton, South Dakota. And it is again an action-packed week, as it were. And we're getting to that point in the journals where every week is really going to be filled with this, because Lewis and Clark are entering into the very place that the expedition was all about. It's the mystery and the wonder of the exploration of a new and unknown area, and all the things that entails. So we talked about what happened to the original expedition. We're going to go back now and start talking about what happened to the Discovery expedition in this past week on the river. So Jim's going to go ahead and roll that footage now, and we'll describe it for you. So I mentioned Floyd's death, and here's the monument located at Sioux City, Iowa, near the South Dakota border. This is the obelisk to Sergeant Charles Floyd that was built there. Now, this is not the original site of his burial, actually, and there's a reenactment taking place on a nearby hillside near the monument, but the original expedition buried Floyd on what they described as a round hill overlooking the river there. That hill has since been washed away and undercut. There's a railroad line that runs nearby there now, and the body was moved, and there were some bones lost from Floyd's grave, and the story of that is a little bit frustrating from a historian's perspective. But at any rate, this site, very near where the original site took place, is where the obelisk is located now, along Highway 29, moving up through Sioux City, Iowa. As I mentioned, a reenactment there took place on the hill on the 20th, which was the date of Floyd's burial. He died about midday on the 20th. Becoming sick on the evening of the 19th, and then on the 20th passing away. And of course, that would have been a very, very troubling moment for the Corps. The journals described that he was buried with all the full honors of war, and that's what you're seeing here before you is a full dress formation and the reenactment of the burial of Sergeant Floyd. And there you are. And then once again, the obelisk and a flyover by the Nebraska National Guard, a fighter wing out of Nebraska, and that was certainly a highlight of the day to have those fighters fly over. And there you see the statue that's located at the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center at Sioux City near the Sergeant Floyd Riverboat Museum, which is also located there. The Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center there is a fine one. You see these fine murals that are inside. And, of course, they have the focus, like many of the interpretive centers, telling the story of the expedition. A great deal of the focus of this particular spot and this particular interpretive center is talking about those things that were specific to this area. One of the interesting things there, they have some robotic displays here, including one of seamen. And there you see seamen looking at the prairie dog that's in the cage. And they've even got some animatronic Lewis and Clarks there that greet the public as they come in, and just an interesting twist on the same story that we're all getting to know so well. It's a fine interpretive center. We certainly encourage you to make your way by there if you're traveling the trail. And I believe that they have a website online as well that we'll be able to connect to via our website. And there you see some of the displays of the medicines. And here you see the animatronic Lewis and Clark. And they're going to fire the cannon. There you go, that sound in the background, the cannon being fired for some homeschool students that are here today to learn more about Lewis and Clark as well. So a little something extra for you all at home. And, of course, the 15-star, 15-stripe flag flying there, and this is quite a large one. We had to pull the keelboat at Sioux City. We actually were getting ready to enter a different phase of the river. Navigation on the Missouri River stops essentially at Sioux City for large vessels. It becomes quite shallow. The pirogues, of course, could go ahead, and we feel that we could have taken the keelboat through as well, but because of our commitment to the Yankton Lewis and Clark Festival this weekend, it was imperative that we make it to Yankton in a timely manner, and we were afraid that if we went and took the keelboat through the low water near Ponca State Park in Nebraska, that we might just simply be delayed. We felt that we could get it through. It was just a matter of time because we would not have been able to make the kind of time that we do in free water. And here you see the National Guard, the South Dakota National Guard, bringing their trucks down to Sioux City where we pulled the keelboat out. The first time it's been out of the water since the 7th of May this year, 2004. And when we pulled the boat out, what this afforded us an opportunity to do is turn our attention to some maintenance. Here you see the boats moving. On the way to Yankton, we stopped briefly at Elk Point where we participated in some ceremonies there and some celebratory events there over last weekend to recognize the election of Patrick Gass, which is a highlight for that community. And there you see the Pop Gun Brigade of local kids there in Elk Point as they participate in the celebration of the commemoration of Lewis and Clark's passing by their area, and some local reenactors there presenting this gentleman you see here is Eugene Gass Painter. He is the great-grandson of Patrick Gass, and they're presenting him with a sash there indicative of a sergeant and a non-commissioned officer. And here you see the Discovery Expedition taking the field at this event, where we're going to both be recognized and help to recognize some fine South Dakota National Guards people who have been deployed and who are standing on guard for our country today in a very real sense as the war in Iraq and the war on terrorism in Afghanistan continue. And here we are taking the form. We have the formation on the field at Elk Point, South Dakota. And in addition to ourselves, there were some other reenactors there, but here you see the Discovery Expedition amassed on the field. And there you see there's a shot of the new dog. That's Bison, Seaman's Bicentennial. We call him Bison. And here you see Sergeant Major Jerry Pope making a presentation on behalf of the Governor of South Dakota to myself and Larry McLean as representatives of the Discovery Expedition. And we've been liaisoning with the National Guard. And here you see an NCO promotion, much like happened 200 years ago with Patrick Gass and his promotion to sergeant. Here we see a young specialist Zeller and his wife there joining in the ceremony as he is promoted to the rank of sergeant in the United States Army National Guard here in South Dakota. And it was a proud moment for the Discovery Expedition to help participate in this ceremony and recognize the good works of these folks as they continue to stand on guard for our country around the world. So a proud moment for us to be a part of that. South Dakota National Guard has been instrumental in our move through South Dakota from the moment, in fact, even into Iowa. Here you see us again yesterday as we made our way to Spirit Mound, as the Corps did 200 years ago. We're making our way from the river. This is a little over a 9-mile march we made yesterday from the river near Vermilion to Spirit Mound. There you see young Ed Falvo carrying the colors from the keelboat. And there the Discovery Expedition members in tandem with the South Dakota National Guardsmen making our way to Spirit Mound. And here we are ascending the hill. And it's quite a beautiful and unique place, and there'll, of course, be pictures on the internet of the mound itself, which is a very curious terrain feature on an otherwise level plain of this area of South Dakota. And this was a terrific opportunity for the Corps as a whole to share in this sort of special moment for us. We've been here before in training missions over the years, and it was an exciting time for us to come back. Captain Clark, you see there, Bud Clark, reading from the journal entry from the 25th when the Corps made their journey there 200 years ago, and here we are with the National Guard. And it was a special time. We stopped there and took a few moments to reflect on how fortunate we were to be part of this reenactment, this commemorative expedition that we're on. And curiously enough, as we took time to reflect on that and bowed our heads to recognize the wonder that we've been, the wonderful opportunity we've been given, the rain fell right on top of the mound and stopped just a moment later, sort of a blessing from above, as it were. So it truly was a spiritual walk to Spirit Mound. Again, that's what's happened to the Discovery Expedition this week. There's going to be an opportunity to read more about that. For those of you who have been asking about my journals, we're going to be getting another upload of them here very shortly, so you'll be able to read all about what's been happening over the last couple of weeks. What we're doing today is working on boats, and we're going to maybe take a real quick look, if Jim could go over and show very quickly what's happening. The boats are out of the water, as you saw them there. We pulled the keel boat was pulled at Sioux City and came up to Yankton, and we took advantage of these couple of days before the festival to do maintenance work on the keel boat. The pirogues were both pulled this week when they arrived here at Yankton at Gavin's Point by water. They've been in the water all along, and from the 7th of May also, and they're here, and we're doing maintenance on those boats, and they'll go up above the dam, be put in above the dam next Monday. The keel boat will go in Lake Yankton, which is right behind us, yet today, and so we can come back and maybe we can see that right behind me is Lake Yankton there, and that's a small body of water just off of the main river, actually connected to the river by a spillway. The water here is the water we've been looking for. You've probably, if you've read any of my journals from 2001 or familiar with this area or what we've been talking about in the past, we finally reached that place on the Missouri River where you can look down several feet, you can see the fish swimming. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing, and we're just so excited to be here. Our guest today, and we're so proud and happy to have her today, is someone who I've known for several years, and it's just good to see her again. Diane Norton, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it. And happy to have you here. This is sort of it feels for some of us like we're kind of coming home because of the time we spent in South Dakota. South Dakota's always been very, very good to us, and just as a South Dakotan, I will express my thanks for having us, so thank you.
Thank you.
Diane is, the way I first met Diane was at some meetings, I guess either some Bicentennial Commission meetings or the Lewis and Clark Trail Heritage meetings, but there's been a lot of things about the Bicentennial over the years as it grew, and we're going to talk a little bit about the growth of the Bicentennial to where it is now in terms of the commemoration nationally and all. But Diane has a particular connection to the Bicentennial, which some people may not think about. When you go to these interpretive centers, where you go to the festivals, and there is merchandise there that you can buy and take home as a commemoration of your experience and that sort of thing. And a lot of times, on not everything, but on a lot of the things that you'll find, there's a seal on that, sort of something that looks like a very official seal, and that, I guess, it's what you've got in your shirt there.
Correct.
And you get one. So first of all, if you would, tell us a little bit about your company, and Diane is here today to talk a little bit about both a company and a web presence, which is lewisandclarktrail.com. And if you could tell us a little bit about that company and about its origins and that sort of thing.
Sure. How it all began, first I'll touch on the merchandise itself and how that relationship began with the National Council. Back in the year 2000, the National Lewis and Clark Bicentennial Council was wanting to go into the merchandise realm. And there was, even back in the year 2000, there was a lot of merchandise that had already made a footprint across America. There was a lot of educational products, there was a lot of caps, mugs, and t-shirts. And so the focus behind the national seal was to put the seal on products that will commemorate the bicentennial, but more importantly, that the seal brings in an extension so that the products and the contracts that are put together, those companies, those manufacturers are giving back a royalty fee. So when the bicentennial closes their doors in 2009, there's money that is left in an educational fund. So kids across America, wherever those funds need to be utilized, they will be put back into a granting type process.
Excellent. Well, that's. Am I on here? I'm not sure if I am or not. I'm sorry. I thought the bike was off for a second. No, that's great. And so, how did that happen? I mean, did you approach the council? Did the council approach you? I mean, what was the evolution of your getting this? Because you essentially have. Now, there's a lot of people selling Lewis and Clark. Excellent. Well, that's. Am I on here? I'm not sure if I am or not. I'm sorry. I thought the bike was off for a second. No, that's great. And so, how did that happen? I mean, did you approach the council? Did the council approach you? I mean, what was the evolution of your getting this? Because you essentially have. Now, there's a lot of people selling Lewis and Clark items out
Correct.
there,
But
you have a pretty exclusive relationship with the official bicentennial, with the Bicentennial Council, that sort of thing. How did that evolve? I mean, were you in marketing of merchandise like this before and just saw an opportunity? Did they contact you? How did that happen?
How that all evolved was they were looking for a company to put together a merchandise program. And that is some of my background. That's what my degree is in merchandising. So I put together a footprint of a plan that they could use to extend it across America. And so our company, a particular company, was chosen to do that. And it's a real honor, number one. But
what was your company beforehand? What was the name of your company?
We actually had established lewisandclarktrail.com back in 1998. And the web presence was already there. It was a travel portal. And then what was attached to the travel portal was an e-commerce website where we had Lewis and Clark merchandise. So it was already a set-up business where the council could streamline into that. And so our footprint was to put together the merchandise, to put together the contracts and the royalty fee agreements. And then what the council did is we worked hand in hand on putting together a format so that the company or the manufacturer knew exactly what they were getting into as far as what the product standards were that were given to us by the National Council.
When you talk about product standards now, are you talking about the quality of the individual pieces, or are we talking about specifically the types of products that you're looking for? I guess the question I'm really curious about is, how did you decide on what products? I mean, obviously, I've got a hat.
Right.
I've got one of the hats, which you made me buy, by the way. I don't know if you remember that or not. You forced me to buy one of those hats, which I would have, and they're great hats, and all the stuff is very top quality. But I mean, what when you're looking for a product, are you still adding products to the inventory? And if so, I mean, what is it you're looking for when you decide whether it's something worthy of having a seal on it?
What we look for now, most of the branded products, like I mentioned, the hat, a lot of those products already have been developed, and what we looked for is working with manufacturers who have high quality merchandise. And it actually went through kind of like a screening process, and what I mean by that is I would actually take a t-shirt, a sweatshirt, a cap, and I'd wash it several times and make sure that it withstood, the rigorous washings that I would do before it could be licensed. And then as far as educational products, it had to connect a person, a child, with the Lewis and Clark story. So if it was like a commemorative coin, it had to tell the story of Lewis and Clark. so that if you picked up a product, you could learn more about the story through that product. For instance, one of the products...
Yeah, please grab some of those and show them to us.
I'm going to grab them with sprinkling a little bit, but this is a little damp. For instance, I'd mentioned about the brand of products. This is a Bicentennial pin. It's not a standalone. What it has is an interpretive card with it, so it tells you exactly what the seal means. So if a person picks up just a standalone product with just this, can you see this? Oops, it's kind of glaring, isn't it?
We can put one of those. We can put a still of that as well.
Okay. So if you see the seal, if you just saw it just on a piece of paper, it wouldn't connect you at all to the story. So what the interpretive card does is it tells you why this seal is important.
Can you tell us, in fact, this is a good opportunity. Why don't you tell us about the seal? You've got the seal there, and you've got one on your shirt, they're on the hats and all, but tell us, explain to us what's on the seal and why those things are there. I found that very fascinating when I learned about it.
Actually, the seal was developed by the council, and it's something that had some controversy in the beginning, but it all makes sense. One of the things that was a kind of controversy was the stars.
Right.
And there's 17 stars on this particular seal. And there was not, it represents the states of the Union at the time of the expedition. One thing that's really interesting is the feathers. And I know that you can't see it probably on this shot. Maybe you can pick it up on the pin itself. But the feathers are dipped in red, which means the sacrifices of the Native Americans.
Let's grab that back. Let's grab that big plastic right there. It's a big seal right there on the.
Right here.
Right. Maybe we can do that, and let's just hold that up there, and maybe Brian can get a shot of that.
See the feathers?
Right. I think we can see them there.
Yeah. They're dipped in red. That's blood, which signifies the sacrifices of the Indians. And then you have the stripes, which shows the oceans, and then you have the mountains. So the whole seal itself tells a story, and a significant story, how this group who started out have become cohesive unit and have explored.
And the compass, the outer circle being the compass, right?
Exactly. So it tells, just the seal itself tells the story of the journey.
Right.
And that's where our focus is aligning the seal with products who want to help tell the story. And that's what the focus is of the seal. So
now when you really, I'm going to give that back to you there.
Okay.
So when this all started, I mean, was it a immediate success? Has it taken a long time to build the interest? I mean, how's the website doing now? How's the sale of merchandise going? Are people buying the stuff?
Yeah. When we structured the merchandise program, when we put it together, there was, I mean, it all went into steps and into almost like tiers. And the first thing we need to do was make sure people knew that this was available and make manufacturers aware of it. And then what we did is we structured so that we had an outreach type program. Each individual licensee, once they're given a license, they can market their own products. So that's the beauty about this program. So not only can they utilize the website, the online e-commerce website to sell their products through, but they can also use their venues and their outlets to streamline their products into.
So you're not simply acting as a sole distributor, you're essentially when a manufacturer approaches you, you essentially control whether or not they receive the seal.
Exactly, exactly. That's what happens. So if it's a manufacturer that's in California, they go through the same licensing process, and then once they become a licensee, then they can use the seal on their product, and then they can use their product through their streamline, whatever venues they have.
Now, what if I just had a great idea for a product, and I said, "Man, nobody's doing this, and this is the coolest Lewis and Clark thing in the world, and I wish everybody could have an opportunity to get this. I could sell this thing." How would I go about? Is there still time? Is there still a way for somebody to find out about this? Where is the project now? I mean, obviously we're into the Bicentennial now.
Correct.
We're moving down the road, but are you still receiving new solicitations, and how does that happen?
We're still receiving solicitations, and the reason being is that it's really a project that has extension. And what I mean by that is, for instance, now we're moving next year we'll be out of the Midwest region and the Great Plains, and we'll be moving up to Montana, into the Northwest. And there's products there that people are developing to launch during that bicentennial year. And so how a person does that is they just go online to lewisandclark200.org, and there's a place for them to download an application and send in to us. So yeah, it is ever evolving because you keep moving across the nation,
Okay.
and there's different products that are going to be introduced.
Right, now you mentioned another website there, because yours is lewisandclarktrails.com.
Right.
Trail, lewisandclarktrail.com. You mentioned lewisandclark200.org,
Right.
which is the National Bicentennial Council website, right?
Correct. That is the website, and they're connected to our website. And how that is done is when you click on Bicentennial Store, it goes into the e-commerce part of the National Bicentennial Merchandise.
Great, very good. Now, we've talked a little bit about the merchandising thing. I don't know if you want to show maybe a few other. Let's take a real quick look at some of the other things you brought, just to show people the diversity of products that we're talking about. I love this one, by the way. And you know, we have a store that has moved with us, and we're of course about to the end of that because we're leaving much of the populated area here. But we've had a number of these products ourselves that our store has sold, and we see these. I love this one. This is a really cool thing, and if you this is a great gift, I think.
This is a classic. This has been a great seller for us. And what it is, and a lot of people don't know what this is. They think it's a sponge. It's actually a compressed T-shirt, and this has been popular with travelers. It's something you can pick up. It's an impulse item they can throw in their bag. If they're traveling via airplane, they can just throw it in their bag, and it doesn't take a lot of room. So this has been one of our top sellers. Along with that, you had an intro on your segment that showed Clark's map.
Right.
That has been a very good seller for us. And it's a little damp right now, but that has been another great seller. And as we move, like I mentioned earlier, as we move across America, we're going to have new products that are introduced.
Okay. Before we move on, and we've got another guest today as well, but I'll tell you, I have a question for you. Have you, and I'm sure you have you had products that have been brought to you what's the most outrageous product that was brought to you, and you've said, no, I'm sorry, that's just not for us? I mean, is there some good story about some crazy thing that somebody thought would be a good idea that you just flat out said that we were not going to do that?
You know what, I have to tell you, there's quite a few, but my memory bank isn't working this morning. I mean, there are quite a few that were rejected, and some of them were rejected just because we already had a product similar to that. But off the top of my head, I can't think of one that just stands out, Scott.
Well, we have seen a lot of strange things along the way, and I imagine if they didn't get the endorsement and they're still out there, I mean, we still see a lot of very strange things along the way. I think we've seen everything from Lewis and Clark toilet paper to Lewis and Clark. I can't even imagine to have been recounted all the different things we've seen. But anyway, these are great things. So if I'm watching the broadcast today and I want to go on and find out more about what you've got, and you do have a lot of educational products as well, including books.
Correct.
And things like that. So once again, why don't you tell us the website is and
lewisandclarktrail.com, and click on online shopping, and that'll bring you into an e-commerce area.
And you accept MasterCard and Visa and all those kind of regular things?
Absolutely.
Well, you are the commercial site, really, for the Bicentennial, and I know a lot of times people have been confused and they went to your site looking for us and those sorts of things, but it's not hard to find it. lewisandclarktrail.com, and we certainly encourage you to do that, to take home a little bit of the story with you. And thank you, Diane, for being here today, and I hope you'll hang around for just a little while. We'll see you after the broadcast if you're not in a big hurry to get out of here. And we're going to be joined here in just a moment by a second guest. So thank you very much. We're going to have a guest. As I mentioned earlier, we're coming to you today from Gavin's Point Dam in Yankton, South Dakota. We've got, actually, it's kind of a strange thing. We're going to have our guest here in just a minute describe for you a little bit about the curious nature of the piece of geography that we are sitting on today. We are on a piece of land between Nebraska and South Dakota, and I'm not even sure that I fully understand where we are right this minute. And we're going to have Carla Zudenhorst come here in just a minute and describe this for us. And Carla, if you're having trouble with that, we can just use this handheld microphone. Okay, you got it? We're getting a microphone on Carla here. Carla is the park ranger, and I guess, please forgive me, Carla, if I say this the wrong way, but are you the head of interpretation or the educational programs, or what is the exact nature of your title besides park ranger? I know you're park ranger.
I am the manager of the Lewis and Clark Visitor Center, and I deal with all the outreach and interpretation that we do around the community here.
Okay, now I've been telling people that we're coming to them from Yankton, South Dakota. I've really been misleading them today, haven't I?
Well, yes and no. Our address is Yankton, South Dakota here, but we're actually in the state of Nebraska.
Okay, which is very confusing.
It's just very confusing.
Of course, for Lewis and Clark, it didn't matter one way or the other.
That's right.
They weren't really in either place. But we're on a little piece of land here. South Dakota would be on my left. I'm looking across at Nebraska right now. Your interpretive center is in Nebraska?
Nebraska, that's correct.
Okay.
That's in Nebraska, and we're in Nebraska actually right now. It's not until you get to the other side of Lake Yankton that you actually become in South Dakota.
Okay, well, and actually, I guess now the property we're on right here is actually Corps property. Is that
Yes,
correct?
it is. Yeah,
So,
U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
So we're on federal property.
Yes.
On top of everything else. So it's a lot of different layers of I guess, jurisdictions and addresses and all that sort of thing. But thank you very much for being here today. Now,
thanks.
we've had a good time at this spot before, several times before. It's a beautiful place, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, it's a unique place. We have guys here, and I know that you may find this hard to believe, but there are fellas. We've been here for about 3 days now. There are guys here right now who have not looked over the dam.
Oh no, you're kidding.
No, and I keep telling
we
you
need to
that.
get them out.
Well, absolutely, and we're going to have, I believe, is that still coming up yet, Mr. Sturm?
No.
Okay. Well, I thought we had some footage of above the dam. We're not going to look at that today? Okay, I apologize. We were hoping to do that. Certainly, next week's broadcast, people will be able to see that. But we've been traveling up this very narrow Missouri River from the mouth of it and down by Wood River, Illinois, for 3+ months now. And we've just passed through the last stretch down here by Ponca, which is very beautiful and very much like the river might have been 200 years ago. And in fact, the shallowness, the sandbars and snags and that sort of thing. But what's above this dam is completely different.
That's right.
And we're eager to get there. But first of all, this is the first dam on the Missouri River.
Yes, it is.
And it's part of a series of dams. So if you could maybe tell us a little bit about the history of the Corps of Engineers and the dams here and just how this all came to pass.
Yeah, one of the things is that the Corps looked at in the early part of the century, there were some real devastating floods on the Missouri River. And the Corps of Engineers, being the agency that's in charge of the waterways in the United States, came out and took a look, and they said, we need to do something. We have people losing property. We have people losing their agricultural land. We need to do something to help them with this. And what they did is they designed a series of 6 dams between where we're at right now and up into Montana. And what they did is they designed them so they could hold back water during times of flood and not flood things downstream so bad. And the other thing is that they could hold water back if they needed it during times of drought. So there's a lot of purposes for having the dams here, other than just people recreating on them.
And there is a lot of recreation. I mean,
Lots of recreation.
Beautiful recreation area.
Yes.
And at all of the dams, and this one is I guess maybe just because we're close to a good-sized town here, and people certainly take advantage of it. There's a lot of there's not only is there the opportunity, but clearly people are taking advantage of it here. But there's something else about. First of all, last year, most of our viewers who followed us last year saw us going through locks and dams. There are no locks here, and as we know, boats used to go all the way up to Fort Benton. And on the river, and now that doesn't happen anymore. I mean, you can't get through. You have to portage around if you're going to do it, like we're going to have to do this week.
Right.
But in addition, you're not a lock and dam, but you're a different kind of dam than our viewers are probably used to seeing because you have hydroelectric power here.
Right.
Now, how does that figure into everything?
One of our main purposes here is hydroelectric power. Not only are we a flood control dam, but we also produce power for the area, and it's sold throughout this tri-state area here. We've got a pretty good range. We produce enough power at this power plant here to light up about 6 cities the size of Yankton, and I believe the population there is about 16,000 or so. So it's really quite a lot of electricity coming out of a little power plant. We're actually the smallest power plant on the river system, so this is the smallest one of the 6 ones up.
And it is, and for our teachers and students who are watching, it's a very interesting thing, and sort of, again, this is a brief conversation today, but hopefully it could be a catalyst for teachers and students to look into hydroelectric. As our country is always faced with, and has been certainly for the last decades, with issues, both of environmental issues, but particularly with regard to energy and that sort of thing. Alternative energy sources are a big deal, and obviously lighting up a number of towns the size of Yankton is not going to solve the nation's problem, but it certainly is. I mean, it's working. You've been doing it for a long time here,
right?
And so you're certainly producing electricity that's having an impact. You mentioned being one of the smallest of the 6 and that sort of thing. When was Gavins Point Dam built? Was it built simultaneously with the other ones? Was it I mean, now you talked about the beginning of the century they were looking at this, and I think it's important sometimes. We've talked about this upstream, but sometimes people are under the impression that these dams have always been there. People like, oh, the water levels, it's always been that high, and I say, well, the dams haven't been there that long. When were the dams built?
This dam here was started in 1952. They completed it in 1957. So it took them about 5.5 years to build this dam, and it started producing power about then. The other dams were built between the mid-1940s and the late 1950s. So all of the dams were built during that time period.
So they we're talking about maybe just 2 generations of South Dakotans, for example,
Right.
and Nebraskans have really been familiar with this. So, and this is an important thing. We've talked about ecological impact, environmental issues, and the river, and all these sorts of things. The dams haven't always been there, and so really this is when we've talked a lot about water release this year and things like that. And so when people sometimes there's a tendency for people to forget very quickly about how good they've had it with regard to the water levels and things like that. And of course we are suffering ourselves a little bit from low water issues, and so the dams provide that. Is there anything about that now, in addition to the dam and all of that, you have this great interpretive center up here on the hill as well. When did that come to pass, and what is its focus? Was it go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. The visitor center here, Lewis and Clark Visitor Center, was built in 1976. The building is beautiful with the big, huge bay windows facing the 3 directions, north, east, and west. And it actually won some design awards from the designer at the time, the architect.
When it was built, was the focus the story of Lewis and Clark, because the lake above here is called Lewis and Clark.
Right.
So was the focus that, or was it the focus on just the dam and the water? And
Yeah, this is what we call a regional visitor center in the Corps of Engineers, and it's one of 13 in the nation, and it's designed to tell the story of this region, and in our case, it's the Missouri River region. And it tells the story of the Missouri River not only back during the time of Lewis and Clark, but also up to present day. So it talks about the river and early navigation on the river. Obviously, Lewis and Clark is a big part of that, so we have that involved with it. Early steamboats and things like that, paddle boats that went up the river. And then we talk about the environment, what kind of environment we have on the river, what kind of animal species you'll be seeing, what the impact of having the dam here is, and on the plants and animals. And then we go into and talk about the different dams along the river and recreation. So it's really a multifaceted regional visitor center.
have you noticed a dramatic increase in your visitation during these last couple of years? I mean, has the Bicentennial seemingly had an impact on your visitors?
Yeah, I think it has. I've seen about a 40% increase this year
Really?
alone.
Really?
Yeah, from the last time I had checked the statistics last month. I haven't checked them for this month yet.
I'm just curious, and when you say 40% increase, what are you looking at in terms of, how many people come to your center each year and visit the dam?
Well, we have in excess of 40,000 that come here every year. So we had about 43,000 last year, and we're looking at probably somewhere in the 50,000 range this year. So that's pretty good for in an area like this at a town this size.
You bet, and that's the thing. It is a small town, and although we're getting into the region of the country here where it's a good sized town actually compared to most of the others around. When we started this year coming up the Missouri River, we left from near Alton, Illinois, my hometown, and Carol Ryan, who is there, was your predecessor here.
That's right.
And this has always been a great stop for when Carol was up here, and we had a great time at this place here. This festival that's going on this weekend, can you tell us a little bit about the history of this festival? I think it's interesting that it's very much, it's seemingly a community festival. At least it's always felt that way when we've been here, and yet it is yet it seems to fall to you all in the Corps of Engineers to sort of put it together. It seems kind of like a unique Corps of Engineers event.
It really is, and I can thank my predecessor, Carol Ryan, for basically being one of the people who initiated the festival. She went into, the Corps of Engineers has got a huge role that they're playing in the expedition this year, in in commemorating the expedition this year. And Carol and a group of other folks from the town said, you know, we really need to do something. We've got a great resource here. We've got such a unique history. This is the first place Lewis and Clark met with the Yankton Sioux Indian.
Right.
So, you know, we need to do something to commemorate that. And they put a committee together. And it was probably in 97 or 98 is when they started this. And said, let's start a festival. And since Carol was a part of it, we were talking about where they were going to put it and things like that. And this is just a natural location because we are located at Calumet Bluff, and that's where Lewis and Clark had their meeting with the Yankton Sioux. So that's basically how it all came about.
And it is a really beautiful setting. We're very eager, as you know, we're going to be putting the keel boat in Lake Yankton here, and we're always talking about the fact that the river doesn't allow us to do things, because it is a very different river. It doesn't allow us to do things the way we used to be able to do them, and that the original Corps was able to do. We're very excited about Lake Yankton because the prop is off the back of the boat. It's sort of, the boat's in its natural state, and we're going to be able to slide it into this beautiful, pristine, clear body of water back here. And excuse me, I think I've got one of your mini South Dakota flies is setting up residence in my ear, and be able to move the boat around there. So we're hoping next week that we'll be able to bring images of the keel boat under sail, cordelling, poling, rowing, as we were able to move around in this body of water here, much in the way that the original Corps did. Thank you so much, Carla. And I just want to tell you, on behalf of the Discovery Expedition and myself personally, thank you so much. From the moment we got here, you all have rolled out the red carpet, and I've told everybody since we crossed the border the other day, it is good to be back in South Dakota. It's good. Nebraska's been great, and Gavin's Point for us is a real important milestone, because what happens above here is real exciting for us. So thank you for that, and thanks to the Corps of Engineers for everything you all are doing. So.
Well, we're honored to have you here, and hope you have a great time while you're here too.
Well, we're looking forward to the festival this weekend. Thank you again,
Me too.
Carla.
Thanks.
All right. Well, listen, that's pretty much concludes Live with Lewis this week. Next week on September 2nd, we're going to be upstream a little bit. We're going to be above the dam. You're going to be able to see that footage I mentioned from Lake Yankton. We're going to be able to show you footage from the dam. What's above this, and you hear me keep talking about this, what is above this dam is going to change your mind and your mental picture of what the Missouri River is. It's going to look like something very different. And although it is not necessarily a natural river above here, because it has been dammed and these sorts of things, it is spectacular. It's going to just really get you excited about what's yet to come. We look forward to that. We're going to be talking with some members of the Native American community next week. We've got a good show planned for you next week, and of course our educational broadcasts, the video conferences, are going to be beginning again soon. I want to check very quickly with Mr. Sturm if we have any emails that have come in that we need to answer right now. Oh, I've answered one or two of them that came in just by the course of our conversation. I want to thank you all again for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next week on September 2nd. Until we see you next time, coming to you again live from Corps of Engineer property somewhere between Nebraska and South Dakota, near Yankton, South Dakota. And we're at the Lewis and Clark Festival at Yankton, and we will see you next week. Until then, on behalf of the Discovery Expedition and the Lewis and Clark Then and Now project, we proceed on.